All right, what's the stuff we need to know? Scholars recognize that John did not copy his account of the feeding of the crowds from the synoptics, but rather worked from an independent tradition. This story had been preserved and passed along in different ways. It was very important. And Marco has a great point. It really resonated hard and powerful all over the place to be preserved like this and interpreted in various ways, and still with the Eucharistic overtones. Wow, this event must have happened, right? In some way. John's account contains some very ancient elements as well as creative elaborations of details found in his sources. One example of an ancient or perhaps original element is Jesus' question to Philip: how are we to buy bread so that these people may eat? That Jesus' apparent ignorance about this was embarrassing to early messianists is evident in the fact that John puts an editorial comment. He said this to test him, because he knew what he would do. Maybe in stage one, folks, it was, what the hell are we going to do with all these people? Says Jesus. Let me see what I can do. An example of creative elaboration is in verses 11 to 12, which carry clear Eucharistic overtones. Jesus then elaben the loaves, and when he Eucharistesas, he diadoken them to those who were tois anakemenos. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, synagogete, the taklasmata left over, that nothing may be lost, hina meti apoletai. Remember, we said in those ancient documents, these terms are found in the handling of and performing the Eucharist.
Why he doesn't want anything to be lost?
His bread is more, clearly he's making overtones with the Exodus and the manna. Moses said very clearly, let it be lost if it's excess. Let it be lost, it will perish. But Jesus' bread is superior to Moses's. The Johannine bread that I get in the Johannine Jesus group is superior to the bread I get from the Judeans. So you have to preserve it. That needs to be kept for the later followers who are actually writing the document down. Does that make sense? Verses 11 to 12 with their Eucharistic flavor quite likely depended on the same sources the synoptic accounts used for the institution of the Eucharist, a tradition not included in the Passion story of John. Remember what it says there in the Eucharistic narratives in the Synoptic Gospels? He took the bread, said the blessing, broke it, and gave it to them, saying, take, eat. It sounds the same verbs, right? In the gospel traditions about Jesus feeding the people, only John mentions the calendrical time of the event. Verse 4, now the Passover, the feast of the Judeans, was at hand. You see, that's an illusion, folks. That's supposed to jog your memory, make you think of what happens at Passover. They sacrifice the lambs. They recall the Exodus, the coming out. They recall the salvation which constituted them as a people of God, Israel, the people of God. They were fed by the manna in the wilderness, the bread from sky vault that was from the broker, from the patron God, but through the broker Moses. Why would he drop that Passover reference there, John? He does that so that his readers or his audience start getting that, yes, this is about Jesus. By the way, what does that tell you about the audience of John? They have to be Israelites, most of them know about Moses, right? Maybe there are a few Samaritans there. Do you think there's a lot of non-Israelite Gentiles there?
No.
In a time where you only read your own tradition, And then when he writes his letters, doesn't he always constantly reference the Old Testament and allude to the Old Testament? What does that mean? Who's he writing to? Is he writing to a bunch of goyim? A bunch of Gentiles? I don't think so. No. See, these are things that we take for granted. As we have seen, the story of Jesus feeding the people seems to echo the story of God feeding his people in the Exodus with manna and quail in Exodus 16. Bread and fish. The people are fed with bread and fish, and John specifies barley loaves. And as we have seen, barley was the most common grain after wheat. It manages to survive extreme heat as well as water shortages much better than wheat. Moreover, it ripens in less time. Since the feast of Passover coincides with the barley feast, the barley harvest, the presence of barley loaves in this story makes plausible sense. The Greek word for fish here derives from another word that means food that is cooked and eaten with bread. Food that is cooked and eaten with bread could be a condiment. The idea is that the fish is not fresh but already prepared, better, more accurately, processed. Rabbinic sources indicate the fish were processed for preservation and transportation in a variety of forms: cured, pickled, salted, or dried. And wine would sometimes be mixed in with fish brine. In the Johannine story, the fish are most likely dried or preserved. Scholars wonder why Jesus would single out Philip to ask, "Philip, where shall we ever buy bread for these people to eat?" Maybe originally that question, an honest question, not a test, was to all of them. But in this story, it's given to Philip. Why Philip? Well, Philip indicates that he is not unaware of the challenge because in his experienced judgment, 200 days' wages couldn't buy enough loaves to feed the crowd. Earlier in the Gospel of John, we learned that Philip was from Bethsaida. Remember I told you that Bethlehem means house of food or house of bread or house of meat? Well, Bethsaida means house of the fisher. Notice that Bethsaida is the capital of Galanitis. Located on the southern shore of the Sea of Galilee, the village's name means house of the fisher. Literally, it means fishing village. Therefore, in this scene, if this scene takes place in Bethsaida or nearby, as Luke suggests, because when you read Luke's version of the story, it takes place near Bethsaida, then Philip is exactly the one to ask because he's from Bethsaida. Isn't this fascinating? He would be most familiar with local conditions.
Makes sense.
Background information about local geography and foods like bread and fish and places like Bethsaida, they help contemporary believers to appreciate how much we need to know about ancient culture in order to even begin to interpret the scripture respectfully. Yes or no?
Yes.
Hey, thanks for watching. Just continue the playlist for the next part of the study. If you have further questions, this is good. They will get addressed, so keep watching. If you found value, please subscribe, like, and share. As always, questions, comments, and criticisms are most welcome. God bless you.